Israel says at least 65 people were injured in the latest round of Iranian strikes across the country. Among the buildings hit on the 7th day of the conflict was a hospital in the southern city of Beersheba. Israel says it's targeted Iran's Natanz nuclear site and has also hit an inactive reactor. Iran state media has released this video said to be of missiles being launched towards Israel. Well, the news agency says the pictures were shot yesterday. Among those injured in Israel include a man in his 80s and 2 women in their 70s who are said to be in serious conditions. Several missiles managed to penetrate Israel's defense system. This is Ramat Gan in the Tel Aviv area. A missile also landed between buildings in Holon. Well, the emergency services say more than 30 people were injured in the attack on the Soroka Hospital in Beersheba. In a tweet, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said terrorist tyrants had launched missiles at the hospital and at a civilian population. He said Israel would exact the full price from Iran for the attack. Well, Iran says it was targeting a military site next to the hospital, not the hospital itself. Well, let's hear from a paramedic who was at the scene.
As you can see behind me, I am on a scene where a missile struck right in the center of a building complex. We have 5 buildings that were hit by the missile. We have one which is the main building and all the other ones surrounding it, which were partially hit as well. We are currently evacuating minimal amount of patients. We have 1 serious patient with 2 more with minor injuries. We still have a lot of work behind me, as you can see, extracting patients from all the buildings, going door from door. Our teams are together with the fire department and front command, trying to get people out of their houses. You can see the house behind me is still on fire.
Well, the Israel Defense Forces say they struck more than 20 military targets in Tehran yesterday. Iranian media says Israel struck an area near the heavy water research reactor in Kondab, which is part of Iran's nuclear program. The complex is commonly known as Arak. Well, it's understood around 60 Israeli warplanes targeted Iran last night. Meanwhile, President Trump is understood to have approved a plan of attack against Iran, but is yet to decide whether he wants to go ahead with it. The BBC's partner in America, CBS News, says Mr. Trump is still waiting to see whether Iran will abandon its nuclear program. Iran's supreme leader has rejected President Trump's demand for unconditional surrender. And the Iranian foreign minister said his country was committed to diplomacy, and his officials say they're considering possible meetings with US negotiators. Well, Mr. Trump is reported to have approved plans for the US to join Israel's attacks on Iran, as we were saying, but it's still to make a final decision on whether those strikes should go ahead. With more on that, here's our North America correspondent, Jake Kwan.
There doesn't seem to be an end in sight as Israel and Iran exchange volleys for nearly a week. The people in neighboring Syria and Jordan are watching the missiles being intercepted like in this video. But the war could spill over to American military bases in these countries as Washington weighs striking Iran directly. It's a 30,000-pound question. Only American bunker buster bombs could penetrate the Iranian nuclear sites at Fordo, hidden deep underground. That's one possible target for President Donald Trump. He has now approved the plan to strike Iran, the BBC's U.S. partner CBS News has reported. But he is holding off on the final order in case Iran agrees to abandon its nuclear program, according to the report.
Now, you seem very open to
Speaking at the Oval Office yesterday, the president insisted that a negotiated settlement with Iran was still possible.
You know, Iran was very close to signing what would have been a very good agreement for them. And maybe that could still happen, I guess. You know, they do want to come and see us. They want to see me in the White House. That's a big statement. But it's very late.
But Iranians have immediately shut down the idea of negotiation or any idea of surrender. Americans have been helping Israel shoot down Iranian missiles, but Iranian officials warn a direct attack on Iran would be crossing the red line.
If they decide to be engaged militarily, direct military involvement in this massacre, definitely we will do whatever necessary to protect ourselves.
Escalation of the conflict beyond Israel and Iran has the world powers worried. Russian leader Vladimir Putin rejected the idea of killing Iran's leader and toppling the regime, saying the Iranian people are consolidating around their leaders. Iran has convened an emergency meeting at the United Nations Security Council, which will be held tomorrow. The same day, several of Europe's foreign ministers will meet with Iranians in Geneva, a last-ditch effort to stop the war from sliding further. But for now, it appears the real decision will be made in Washington, inside President Trump's war room. Jay Kwon, BBC News, Washington.
Well, for more on that, we've been hearing from Kasia Junaidi, who is our BBC Persian correspondent in Washington.
Hi. Hello, Regina.
Hi, Kasia. So just tell us what the feeling is in Washington at the moment, given what we heard there about what the White House is pondering.
Well, there is a lot of speculation here about what President Trump would make of when and what will be the final decision to be made by the president. So he spoke about his options about Iran yesterday several times during the day. And of course, he was also talking about that if it's still a possibility of, if it's still room for negotiations with Iran. And he said that the Iranians have want to come to the White House and talk to him. But he's told them it's late, and why didn't they negotiate with him earlier? But on the other side, the Iranians have said that they've never asked for talks with President Trump at the White House. Actually, they said as long as the war carries on, there is no room for negotiations, and they will only talk when the war stops. So we are waiting to see what the president's final decision is about, whether the U.S. would attack Iran together with Israel, hitting its nuclear installations, including the Fordo facility, which is within the mountain, within the earth.
And Kasia, you've been monitoring Iranian reaction as well. So what have we been hearing from Iran and indeed in the media there in response to what the White House is pondering?
Well, you know, in the past 24 hours, Iran has been dealing with cellular network outage and disruption in internet connections. So actually, there is some sort of blackout from what we've been receiving from inside Iran. There has not been that much information on social media about what the situation is there. But from what we know is that the people are also waiting and speculating to see what happens with President Trump's decision, because that could be changing not only the situation inside Iran, it could be having implications in the region, because then if the U.S. joins Israel to attack Iran, then the Iranian regime may retaliate and may try to hit U.S. bases in the region. Ali Khamenei, the leader of the Islamic Republic, had a televised speech yesterday, and he warned the Americans about the implications of joining the war and attacking Iran. So there is a lot of anticipation. At the same time, the streets in a city like Tehran, the capital, are almost empty. Those who could have left the capital have left the capital. Many cities have been, the major cities have been evacuated, and are not that many people are left on the streets. So the situation in Iran is also that of a country that is under attack, and people are waiting to see what happens next.
OK, Kasia, thank you very much for that update. Monitoring events from where you are, of course, in Iran. Thank you for the moment, Kasia Junaidi in Washington there. Well, let's speak to our correspondent, Dan Johnson, who is in Jerusalem. Oh, sorry, let's go to Hugo Beersheba, who is in Holon for us. Hugo, you're at the scene now of where some of the Iranian missiles struck. Just tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing.
Yeah, Regina, so we had a wave of Iranian missiles earlier today. Air raid alert sounded across the country at around 7 o'clock in the morning. The Israeli authorities said around 30 missiles were fired by Iran, as Iran continues to respond to these Israeli airstrikes. Most of those missiles were intercepted by the country's air defense systems, but some of them did manage to penetrate the defenses. And one of those missiles hit here this residential neighborhood in the city of Holon, town near Tel Aviv, and the authorities are saying that the missile landed between these two buildings here. You can see that the top section of that 4-story building partially collapsed. The authorities are saying that 3 people were injured as a result of the attack. Here there is some damage in nearby buildings, houses as well. So I think it shows that Iran continues to have the ability to carry out these attacks. We've seen that the latest attacks by Iran hadn't been as intense, which was seen as an indication of the impact of these Israeli airstrikes on the Iranian military's ability to carry out those attacks. And reflecting that, the Israeli authorities yesterday announced that some of the restrictions that had been imposed because of the war were being eased. So again, what we're seeing here today is that the Iranian military continues to have the ability to carry out these missile attacks, causing a lot of damage in places across Israel.
Indeed, and of course we're hearing more about the hospital as well that was struck. Hugo, just tell us a little bit more about the hospital, where it is in relation to where you are, and what more the authorities and medics have been telling us.
Yeah, Regina, so this is a hospital, the Soroka Medical Center in the southern city of Beersheba, about an hour's drive from here. And a missile struck this medical center, medical facility. The Iranian authorities are saying that the target of that attack was a military facility near this hospital. So we've had reaction from the Israeli authorities accusing Iran of deliberately targeting a hospital. We don't know, what the target here could have been, but again, this was another, missile that managed to penetrate the country's air defense systems. Now, the reaction that we're seeing from the Israeli authorities so far indicate that these Israeli airstrikes are going to intensify. The Israeli defense minister says that not only military and nuclear facilities will be hit, but also government buildings, facilities linked to the Iranian regime. So here, I think, again, the strategy, as we've been discussing for days now, seems to be to put a lot of pressure on the Iranian authorities, hinting at possible regime change in Iran as a possible goal in this operation.
Indeed. Benjamin Netanyahu saying that Iran will pay a heavy price. So no sign that things are going to let up, Hugo.
No sign of de-escalation here. On the contrary, because now we're hearing from, those reports in America that President Trump has decided to go ahead with, has approved military plans for direct American involvement in this Israeli offensive, but no decision has been taken yet.
And
a little bit of context here, because it's crucial, because this is, a very dangerous moment here in the Middle East, in which we could see a major regional escalation with American involvement. The Israelis have been saying that this campaign is to destroy, damage Iran's nuclear program. They've been saying that Iran was getting close to the point of no return in developing a nuclear weapon. There hasn't been any evidence to support this, this view. The assessment by the international community, including from the Americans, is that the Iranians had made no decision to weaponize their nuclear program. We don't know whether they had plans to do so, but the evidence on the ground was that no decision had been made. Iran says this is a war of aggression, that it has the right to defend itself, and has been threatening to target American military interests in the region if there is direct American involvement. And so we could see, the potential here of a wider regional conflict.
Okay, Hugo Beersheba in Holon, thank you very much. Well, let's take you to Beersheba, which is where the hospital that was struck was, because we're listening to, we're not quite sure whether that's a doctor or some sort of official, but let's have a listen in.
We will know more by the end of the day, and we will issue more statements.
Why have you decided to evacuate one specific area of the hospital yesterday?
We've been moving department since Friday, since the beginning of the war with Iran. We've moved all of our unsafe departments immediately, and in the following days we've moved departments that have sheltered areas, but we felt should be more protected. So for instance, the ward that we moved yesterday, that was hit today, does have sheltered areas, but we felt we could do better, and we moved it. This was not as a result of any warning or expectation. It's just what we do for emergency preparedness.
How many patients are now where in the hospital during
Around 650. Most of them in sheltered areas, or formal sheltered areas. Yes, we do have an underground hospital. We moved probably around 150 patients who are immobile to sheltered areas several days ago, well, 4 or 5 days ago.
How do you react personally to that? Sorry, what is your state of mind right now?
We're working and providing care for the population. The personal feeling will take a while, as was the event in October 7th, but it's total shock that someone would target a medical center. People in the hospital, the people we have left in the hospital are elderly people, cancer patients, people who need urgent medical care that cannot go home. And these people were targeted directly to be killed by a missile attack. There is no other explanation for this, and it's shocking that such a thing would take place.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're just going to leave that. Apologies, the sound was not that clear, but a little update from Beersheba. Of course, that is where the hospital was hit by a wave of missiles from Iran. Well, let's go to Jerusalem and speak to our correspondent, Dan Johnson, who's been monitoring all developments from there. Dan, we heard there from Hugo and from Kasia, really, how both Israel and Iran are not going to de-escalate. In fact, what we've seen overnight just shows how things are intensifying.
Absolutely, yes. And this intensification, this ramping up of the missile attacks from Iran into Israel seems to coincide with the Israeli cabinet meeting that happened last night, which was at the same time that Donald Trump was meeting his top security officials in the White House, monitoring the situation here, assessing that plan to potentially support Israel in its attacks on Iran. It was 8 o'clock here, local time, that we saw the first barrage of missiles last night. Then there was a second just after midnight. The Israeli air defences were very active through the night. The air raid sirens sounded across the country. People were advised to take shelter. And that happened again here at 7 a.m. this morning, when we understand up to 30 ballistic missiles were fired by Iran. And that's when that hospital was hit in Beersheba. There have also been impacts around Tel Aviv and the suburbs of Israel's capital. Here in Jerusalem, we heard very loud interception explosions in the sky. It didn't feel like anything actually got through here in Jerusalem, but lots of missiles for the Israeli air defences to intercept. And that was the most intense barrage to hit this city, people are saying, in the week of this intensifying conflict. And it's underlined to everybody exactly what the risk is, what is at stake here. Now, I suppose it cuts both ways, and some people will argue this shows the threat that Iran is continuing to pose to Israeli citizens, to their neighbourhoods. Therefore, why Israel has to continue its strikes on Iranian targets and why it needs that US support. Others will say, look, this is what happens if you provoke Iran, and that if there is any further escalation in this conflict, we're going to see more of this, more damage in Israel, more loss of life, more casualties. Around 65 people across the country are reported injured this morning. And the Israeli authorities have this morning issued an update about the entire 7 days of this conflict so far, saying that 24 people in Israel have been killed, over 830 injured, and 20,000 buildings or vehicles have been damaged in the last week or so. So it's clear to everybody what the cost of this conflict is, but still a huge decision for Donald Trump and for the Israeli leadership to make about exactly what happens next, whether they try to push towards some sort of peace negotiation or a deal, or whether indeed they do escalate, as Benjamin Netanyahu seems to favour. That's why he's asked for that US support. It is possible that everything we've seen, the increased rhetoric, the ramping up of attacks, is all designed to put pressure on, to show force, to solidify each side's position so that they can make a negotiation, they can bargain from a position of strength. But it's also possible that this is the uncontrolled escalation that people have been warning about, that this runs away now and that we see even more destruction both in Iran and here in Israel too. That's what people are fearing.
OK, Dan, and is there any more wider regional reaction? Some of Israel's neighbours, of course, and other countries, say Egypt, for example, or Qatar, people that have been brokers in this wider region?
Yeah, most of the surrounding countries have been pushing increasingly over the past few days for a peace settlement. And we've heard that message coming from as far afield as China and Russia too. We understand yesterday a plane with a delegation from Iran actually flew to Oman, and it may be possible that they are in position ready to negotiate if indeed the Israelis come to the table and there is some possibility of talks. A lot of speculation about whether that is actually what's happening, whether that would even be possible. Donald Trump says he's got this plan in place, that he favors supporting Israel in what it wants to do, but that he's looking to Iran to back down, to come and negotiate, to reach some sort of peace settlement that would keep Israeli citizens safe, reassure Israel that Iran has no nuclear ambitions and no desire to further attack this country. But the Israeli leadership is very strong in condemning the attacks this morning, the apparent targeting of a civilian site. The Israeli Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has called the Iranians Nazis for attacking that hospital. The Iranians have responded to that, saying that actually they were targeting some sort of intelligence or military technology facility that is nearby to that hospital. But the rhetoric again is increasing. Israel has promised that there will be more attacks in retaliation to what we've seen overnight and this morning. So at the moment, all the indications are this is potentially going to get worse before it gets better, but it is always possible that this is the two sides going up to the brink before they come back and potentially negotiate some sort of settlement. Whether that's likely, all up in the air, potentially all for Donald Trump to decide.
Okay, thanks so much, Dan Johnson in Jerusalem for us. Let's stay with the story. Let's now speak to Azadeh Moaveri, the Associate Professor of Journalism at New York University. Thank you very much for joining us here on BBC News. As we heard from Dan there, things just seem to be escalating. As your perspective of someone who watches Iran very closely, what do you think the calculations are in Iran at a government level at the moment?
I mean, we know that there are pre-negotiations going on. There are intermediaries who are trying to broker some sort of preliminary talks in excuse me, ahead of possible return to the negotiating table. There's a meeting of Iranian diplomats and the E3 on Friday. But I think for any of that to be feasible, for talks to be restarted, from the Iranian side, there would be a clear expectation that the bombing would stop first. I think it's impossible that Iran would be willing to go back to the table and resume where they had left off when Israel attacked Iran while this fighting continues if the nuclear facility at Fordow is bombed. So, there's frantic diplomatic activity going on. The Iranians have been messaging and they're in touch with various intermediaries, but the precondition would be for the bombing to stop first.
Which countries do you think hold a sway over Iran in this equation at the moment? I mean, some people have even talked about Russia and the relationship Russia has with all the players in this.
I mean, I think Iran is strategically lonely. I don't think that there is any player that is capable of pressuring Iran to do what it's not inclined to do to reassert some form of deterrence. Inside Iran, this is very much playing out and perceived and being waged by Israel as a war on civilians. I think it's really critical that the media framing of the sites that are being targeted inside Iran acknowledges that it's not simply nuclear sites that are being hit. They have been hitting for the past 6 days municipalities, water systems, energy infrastructure, refineries, media bases, civilian areas, and dense neighborhoods. So this is not targeted clinical strikes on a nuclear program. This is a war that's being waged on civilians, and there's mass displacement of millions of people. It's very hard to get casualty numbers. But I think the Iranian leadership understands that the public mood is changing. Iranians perceive this as an attack on the Iranian nation, on its sovereignty, and there is a real sort of patriotic, sort of palpable sentiment emerging. People feel like their livelihoods are being threatened. the scenes that I'm seeing in Tehran, what I'm hearing from friends and family. I mean, I covered the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine through the displacement of Ukrainian refugees. You have a massive civilian population that's on the move. Very vulnerable people can't move. So I think to the extent that public sentiment inside the country is coalescing around that gives the government a sense that...
Got to stop you there. Azadeh Moaveni, thank you very much for ending this half hour. There's plenty more on the BBC News website. Do stay with us.